may allow them. And it's the most important thing. It's money. Raha pane prakta käima. Igal juhul, suur tänu teie jäite minuga. So, fundraising and funding, actions. Communicate with Seed Capital about potential streamlining synergy opportunities, basically to reduce overlap and other inefficiencies. So that's key, so we can move forward. The second point, get an honest view of the financial health of all of our organizations. And again, in collaboration with Seed Capital, because we've already begun to do that. So we don't want to, again, overlap, but we need to understand where the money is in this community, especially for the charitable organizations, people who work really hard, and including Seed Capital needs to know, because we have limited funding. We have to do the fundraising. And EKN will need to do fundraising, so we'll get to that later. And the third point of the actions is to initiate new fundraising activities and ideas, not only for EKN, but across the board. The enablers cooperate with Seed Capital, yay, to research government funding and other NGO or other opportunities where other funding might be available. And 3, activate an Estonian Canadian Board of Trade, linking in with the business community, both in Canada and in Eesti. Just 3 of them. Some of the hurdles, out-of-date database, no tax receipt for donations directly to EKN, and 3rd, Estonians are reluctant to donate. We need a stronger message overall for all of the organizations, and not just for EKN, but that would certainly be a good start. What's our sell? Any questions? Or we do that after? That's it?
No. Unless there's any specific questions.
And we have 3 action items. Support Estonian Canadian interests in Canada, support Estonian interests of Canadians in Canada, and number 3, represent Estonian Canadian interests in the Eesti Vabariik. Now, action item 1, support Esto-Canadian interests in Canada. This would be things like just let's say Seederoru has, just to throw an example out of the air, as a problem, let's say, with the town of Central Wellington. Well, EKN can be the political group that come into action to help Seederoru with whatever problems they were to face. So this would be stuff that we would have in our own communities, whether with our own Eesti Maja or Tartu College or the local stuff, and our local interactions with local, municipal, and mostly provincial governments. Enablers would be friendly municipal politicians. Enablers are friends in the media, and enablers would be politically active Estos who will go to bat for us. Threats would be ignorance of municipal politicians, apathy of Estonian Canadians, and threats of feeling of powerlessness by Estonian Canadians, like, oh geez, I can't do anything, there's nothing I can do. So this is the kind of thing where we can go to the bat for people and say, okay, here are the speaking notes, here's who to write to, here's what to do. The second action item, support and advocate for Estonian interests in Canada. What we mean by that, and this is primarily federal, is that when you are fighting, let's say, if there's Eesti was invaded or the Russia was doing something in Eesti, sure, the Eesti consulate represents the Estonian Vabariigi interests for Eesti. But the thing is, for a Canadian politician, they'll look, oh, it's just some weird foreign country, who cares? They do care about Canadian voters who vote them in. So we have to go, not as Estonians, but as Estonian Canadians who represent the interests of our voters, and our voters care about that the Eesti Vabariik continues to exist. So we represent those interests in Ottawa. Now, it may be true that those Estonian Canadian interests and the interests of the Estonian Vabariik are the same, but it's a completely different message, because one's coming from a foreign government, one's coming from internal, from their own voters. Enablers, political friends in Ottawa. Another enabler would be friends in the Canadian media. who are pro-Eesti and anti-Putin. Enablers are politically active Estonians who will contact their member of parliaments. Threats, Russian propaganda, which Margus Golga was just telling us about, which is threats are just simply ignorance of Estonia by elected Canadian officials. Another threat is the apathy and the feeling of powerlessness of Estonian Canadians. You know, there's a time when you have to step up. Now the third action item is represent Estonian Canadian interests in Eesti Vabariik. So this would be, let's say if let's say some Estonian group in Canada wants some support from the Kultuuriministeerium or something, just to take an example. This is the kind of thing that the Eesti EKN should be supporting. And enablers are political friends in the Eesti Vabariik. Another enablers, friends in the Estonian media, and enablers are politically active Estonians in Eesti who are, let's say, who support väliseestlased. Threats are ignorance of Canadian Estonians in Eesti, and sort of maybe anti-väliseesti feelings in Eesti. So those are our three things, and those are our enablers and threats. Thanks.
Ours was the cooperation and collaboration page, and we came up with 4, so we subsumed one into the other one, so we still have 3. The first item that we came up with was that EKN could be used as a development and collaboration tool for organizations. So where we are looking for some help, and the example, because Kristi was in our group, let's say Kristi wants to connect with the Latvian Film Festival director. Hey EKN, do you know anybody in that area? Have you been in touch with anybody? And hopefully that then could turn out into, so if we share our contacts with each other, that could help us out. The hurdles for that is we all seem to have a bit of a protectionist mentality, right? You know, this is our organization and we do it this way. You know, it's kaks eestlast ja kolm koori, you know, that kind of thing. Enabling is that to overcome that, and this is where we subsume this one, is that if we have a point person or point people at EKN, let's say pointperson.ekn@gmail.com, who is able to pass on that request to other people at EKN or other organizations and try to be a clearinghouse for information. Second way to cooperate and collaborate is we thought that just like this meeting, but to invite all organizations, even the tiny ones, and even if they're not organizations, but are initiatives. And that way we all get to speak with each other. It's a point where actual information gets passed around, and not necessarily in formal settings, but over by the Rabarberi Plaadi Kook. You know, when we talk about what our concerns are, and that is actually a much more useful and organic way sometimes than doing these formal, than the formal part of such an event. Hurdles are really, do we want 2,000 people coming in? What about the folks in Vancouver, in Nova Scotia, that sort of thing? Well, they can come in person. Perhaps we can allow written concerns or suggestions to come from those organizations. How to incorporate that, we didn't get quite that far. Am I right? No? Okay. So yes, so take the temperature annually at the town hall, whether it's EKN's, how EKN is doing, how individual organizations are doing. Third, and this is probably branching over into communications and liaison, but wouldn't it be great if we really did have a central site where we could post all of our events, and even, you know, the problem came up, we don't want to poach ASTLO or any other such site that actually generates revenue from these sorts of things. So that was the hurdle, because not every organization has the money to take out an ad in ASTLO. So maybe EKN could find some kind of way to fund just text-only listings, or work together with ASTLO and not poach anybody's income, but try to come up with something that would allow us to find out what everyone's doing.
Like the moved before, previous group. So the first task, let's put that, would be support and promote Estonian language programs across Canada. the first enabler was to set up online classes to practice and learn Estonian in cooperation with Estonian Minister Minister of Education and Research and all kind of Estonian institutions and professionals who are dealing with Estonian language. So we don't think that EKN should make those special web pages, but maybe EKN could be a central organization to keep this topic in our minds and to help to put those people and institutions together. And where we get the idea was from Vancouver, because we have Estonian school. They don't, and there are other communities, they don't have it. But they have children, they have grown-ups who want to learn Estonian. But we need to help them somehow to keep going with those processes. So the next enabler for that topic would be develop tutoring teacher database. Just like you were talking, we need to know who are the people who could teach Estonian language, let's say in British Columbia, who are the people who know very well Estonian, just to keep that kind of lists. Then C says promote participation Estonian immersion, camps, cultural events, laulupidu, camps here in Canada but also in Estonia, so that especially young people, they don't learn the language at the classes or from the internet, at the internet environments, but they can really live this Estonian life and listen to real Estonian language and to use it. The hurdles, money, time and people. Next topic, involve support and make non-speakers of Estonian feel engaged and included. How to do that? First, we should recognize and encourage and support natural leaders. There's one. They want to do things, but they are kind of lost and sometimes doesn't feel good, very good, because they don't have Estonian language. They think that their Estonian is not enough. We should provide simultaneous translation. That's what Baptist Church has been doing for years. We are having here already very many events in English. I can see that helps very much. So that husbands are coming, friends are coming, Canadians are coming who have just sometimes non-Estonian connection at all, but we should think more about also translation. Maybe there are still ways. We have to learn from Baptist Church how they are doing this. And C says, communicate regarding opportunities to travel to Estonia. Again, that's a cultural context, personal context, and language immersion. Hurdles, attitudes of people. Some Estonians are very strict about Estonian. That's not very good. Some people could get nervous if they think they are too self-critical and think they don't speak very well Estonian, but it doesn't matter. It matters that if you try, then you learn. Second hurdle is money, and third is time. Then third thing would be promote cultural events, planning plus coordination. That's something we already heard about it. And what we thought would be good to implement event scheduling calendar through internet, because there are Google Calendar and different software already which we can use not just for the final plans, but like this planning calendar. Even if we just have an idea that we want to have something on, let's say, May 28th, then we put it on the calendar and all they have to see Estonian House has some idea, maybe we here will not plan something big for that event, for that date. So one thing is to publish all those finalized plans and calendar events, but the other thing is we need planning every day, and not just for the next month, but for the next year. And why it's especially important is, and that's our second idea, is that we need very good planning for Eesti Vabariik 100, and that comes together with this calendar thing. And third says that we could have a database of experts, organizers, people who are doing already things. So if you need some help, idea, or just double check what their plans are for that particular day, then you know to whom you should talk to. Hurdles: manpower, old politics, entrenchment, called also espion and kankekaelsus. Third, lack of centralized info, and fourth, we have four here, is funding. Thank you.
So we were part of the communications group, and out of the list of sticky notes there that we saw, there are 3 areas that were most prevalent. The first is actually some of the elements are what Ellen touched on, so I'll start with what we have listed on the bottom. We've got communications, we have web presence, and we have database. So with regard to communications, I'll just cover off Ellen's point because we did talk about it. She was talking about a centralized event space of some kind, something that is a community calendar, and that came up in our list of post-its as well. So as part of the communication strategy that we may want to develop, it might include some sort of tool where organizations can include their events. One of the things that came up in our group was that there are challenges between organizations. One group may have a booking for at some location, and there's another one that is another event happening elsewhere, and neither know of each other, and attendance is low in both as a result. So if there's a central calendar that the community can use, we can see who's booking in various locations and what's happening. So some of the enablers for the communications in general are that we have a very educated team who can create good communications messaging. We've got a lot of, and especially in this large group that we now have with EKN, plus the organizations that are involved with us today and beyond. Secondly is awareness. EKN's facing a bit of a relevance question right now, and it's our job to bring the relevance back of this organization, so the communications that we push ahead with is extremely important. It's important to communicate effectively with the other organizations that are with us, but it also in the community at large. We were talking about fundraising this morning, and one of the challenges with that is that it's pretty hard to ask for money when you don't know why you're going to be receiving it, and especially why a person should be giving to you in the first place. So it's our job to make EKN relevant again. I think in the last few months we're well on our way, but we have a long road ahead. So we have to work together to increase the relevance of this organization. So not only is that an enabler, but it's also a hurdle. What else do we have there? Oh yeah, with the communications, one of the other, the other sections we have here are web presence, and we sort of take that for granted today, but the other side of it, that there's a demographic that isn't going to be able to be reached this way, so we are, print is actually a communications hurdle for us right now. There's a cost involved with that, there's time involved with that, there's also timeliness involved with that. And so we have to find smart ways to move our print communications into the 21st century as well. One way we could get around that might be to start pushing our energy towards Estiello and other print media to reach a demographic that wouldn't reach us on the web on a regular basis. Another hurdle in the communications listing are content creators themselves. So we actually, again, we have a great team here who can easily provide content. We have a way to put it out there, but we haven't identified each other yet. So that's a step that we need to talk about. We've got to find each other and know who is going to become a team of communicators on behalf of EKN and those who work with the other organizations to effectively communicate. Web presence. Again, we take that for granted, so I'll just pick that off pretty quickly. The enablers are that it's quick. We can launch quickly, we can launch at a low cost, we're up and running. Actually, we're already up and running, but we have a lot of improvements to make, but we have an immediate, we've got an island on the sea that is the web, and that's a place where we're already starting to put information there, plus social media tools that, again, we take for granted, but we're finding so far that social media is probably the most likely place where people will receive information. The website, I would imagine, will become a repository of that information as an archive of news. Maybe blogs, maybe other information that needs to belong there, but that is not, we shouldn't imagine that that's going to be the central location of our communication. It's just a tool, and it's probably a repository. The communications that happen on our web presence will probably be elsewhere, so we've got to identify those and then take advantage of them. Ease of access is one part, and global access, of course. I think, again, we take that for granted, but there isn't much of a web presence right now. We don't have one, really. It only really was launched again just prior to the election, so it's 3 months old, right? Nobody really knows about what EKN is doing out there, so that ties to our relevance question down below. From an inter-organizational point of view, we've got access to creating intranet pages for ourselves. We actually started doing that almost right away by moving almost all of our documents online. Anything that we're creating is already shared, is immediate, it's accessible. If we were to all walk away in 4 years during the next election, the next UACTOs group would have access to those documents without us having to brief them, really. They may want to know the contents, but it's available. So our job right now is to go back in time a little bit and bring some of those materials there. But the point being that the web presence is important because it also ties to how we work internally. Some of the hurdles with that, again, with web presence, demographics, again, there's a percentage of our community that won't be accessing the web, so we have to communicate with them differently. Security came up. That's a legitimate issue, not just because there might be various Trojan horses and standard sort of viruses and things that hit websites, DDoS attacks and such, but also because we are a politically active organization. So we have no reason to believe that the Russians wouldn't, why wouldn't they be interested in the materials we have on our website, especially in the back end, which is why security is definitely an issue. Also on our list are an administrator, people who are going to administer this space now and beyond. So as it stands today, there are a group of us who are able and willing to do it, but what happens in 12 years? We don't know. So we have to prepare to have team members who are capable of handling those sorts of things going forward. So it might actually not be a hurdle today, but it definitely will be at some point. So we need to find those people. And lastly, the database. This is an interesting one because not only is it an EKN issue, but it's actually a community issue. There's this challenge with keeping mailing lists up to date. And legally, we're not allowed to share these mailing lists. And also, every step of the way, there's a challenge with keeping these overlapping pieces of information up to date in general, just to communicate in any which way. We experienced that with the EKN election, and we heard from our table that it's an ongoing problem. One of the upsides to, or I should say, one of the enablers here for this, sorry, I'm just going to collect my thoughts for a second. I had to take a step back. One of the solutions we came up with at the table here was how do we integrate mailing lists to move our communications forward? And this is not just an EKN question, it's actually a community question. One hurdle around this is to, or one way to get around this is to get the organizations involved themselves, and this is one of the first enablers on our list. Reach out to all the organizations in the community and have them communicate with their people to begin contributing to a self-serve tool that we'll probably look into building. And that means that over time, people can log on to a system of some kind. It would be online. You have your own registry information. The organizations administer that collectively. So we might be the leaders of that system, but other organizations would have administrative access to it as well. And a person can log on, put their personal information in, and opt in or opt out of the various organizations they want to communicate with or receive communications from. So that might include any number of organizations nationally. In theory. So if that's possible, what do we get out of that? That's what a huge enabler out of that is census. We start to collect our own data that helps us communicate with up-to-date information and hopefully reduce paper, reduce overlap, and eventually streamline a list that we can all consider up to date. But most importantly, it's considered a master list. No organization in our community has a master list anymore. This is it. A couple of the hurdles. Adoption rate. We have to convince everybody to use this system. Security, that's a biggie. The same issue came up on the other end of the spectrum with self-serve. If you don't know how to use it, how do we educate people on how to use it? And also the politics in our community. Some people are holding those mailing lists and those cards pretty close, so we have some convincing to do that that's the most valuable place to keep information like this.
So, it's been said that children are the future, and with all due respect to the funding and fundraising side, I'd like to think that youth is the most important category, because you may have all the money in the world, but if no one's there to spend it, then someone else is going to take it. So what we did was we narrowed it down to 3 primary topics, and they're all in order. We're not reinventing the wheel here, and there are a lot of great ideas that we're going to be repeating. But what we boiled it down to was 1, awareness. They need to know, the youth need to know. 2, engagement. Once they're aware, they have to, get off the couch, away from the TV screen or the whatever screen, and get going. And then involvement. The last one is involvement, and that's the most important. Succession planning, all that other stuff, taking a leadership role in the community. It all revolves around finally getting them, empowering them to take over for us once we're gone. So awareness, we just spitballed some ideas. Something like a Tere Tulemas, sort of an expo, leveraging something like Eesti Kool, they're already captive, or Suve Kodu Laagreid. Showcasing every single organization that we have. We have more organizations than we actually realize if we start thinking about it and jotting it all down. And to anticipate that a teenager knows all the ways that they can get involved in the community is pretty ludicrous. So something like a semi-annual expo where every organization gets a table or a few minutes to speak about what it is they do, so that if someone's interested in dancing, they don't have to go and ask around. They'll know that Kungla is the Rafa Danso group to join, or Meskor if they want to continue and acquire beyond Kolikor. And ultimately, a Norte Congress, our whole table sort of preached and repeated the idea of just giving the youth some sense of empowerment and involvement, and the idea that they are creating their own Estonian community in a sense, right? Because we have all these organizations right now, but if no one wants to take up the mantle of another organization, it's just, what's the point, right? So allowing them the platform to communicate their desires, their wishes, what they want from the Estonian community is very important. So again, this sort of seamlessly transitions into engagement. What do they want? And recently being very young, I still technically pretty young, but in all, I joke. But the most effective way for me in order to stay involved in Scouts was when we all sat down at the end of the year and said what worked, what didn't. Turns out that kids don't like sitting around a table for 2 hours every Saturday morning talking about how to get a badge. They would much rather go outside to the park, maybe go hang gliding. We had some crazy ideas, but we actually went gliding. We went and did laser quests. We did all kinds of other stuff, and it was a great way to control our own curriculum. And this sort of, be it Scouts, be it Eesti Koolid, giving them the power to create their own experiences in an Estonian context is very, very important. At least we found. And then, using the social networking aspect, we all think we understand social media, but I'm getting, I don't know what Snapchat, what's the worth of Snapchat, but apparently all the kids are using it now. But leveraging that, and even something like IT for Eesti Koolid, right? If someone's in Hamilton, or Hamilton's a bad example, but if someone's in Udora and they don't want to drive all the way down, once a week and spend hours on end at Eesti Kool, why not have a video conferencing element? Why not have that IT element so they can check in? What if they're on a vacation and they're missing their Eesti Kool and missing their friends? It's another additional resource to utilize we preach about how ASD is so tech savvy and e-Estonia, but we sort of seem to be lagging behind a little bit here. So just working with the youth to determine what are the most effective ways to leverage our technological intellectual capital and create a more engaging program for them. So with that, we got into the involvement piece. So leadership, development, and mentorship, that's a huge aspect, particularly for succession planning. Very often we're very protective of our organizations, how we run them, and we have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of that efficiency in the organizational planning stage, let the youth sort of take over the reins, slowly feed them bit by bit, let them stumble through it, but let them learn from their mistakes, and ultimately you're going to carry forward a much stronger organization and a much stronger Estonian community. Again, ASD Koolid, we've got to reinvent the curriculum a little bit, or a little bit more than just a little bit, because at the end of the day, the numbers are decreasing. We can't hide behind that fact. And how do we get children to ultimately take up the cause, learn Estonian, the language, improve their linguistic skills, and improve their overall awareness of the great culture and the great history that we can stand behind. And this again, not just ASD Koolid, but Laagrid as well. And continually solicit feedback, be it surveys, be it whatever. We just need to let them know at every single venture along the way that their voices are being heard. Maybe they don't like it, but they don't feel confident enough to speak up about it. But at the end of the day, if they're not going to tell us, they're just going to completely disengage from the community. We've been seeing that already. It's very evident. But we can cut off the bleeding now and have our numbers actually rise with a complete shift in mentality. And then we discussed a little bit about scholarships and grants, some kind of at-need, or at-risk, not at-risk, but funding that's for children to get involved on an as-needed basis. That's what I wanted to say. Things like, I work in sports, so like Jumpstart or Kids Sport, some kind of anonymous application. It's it can be very humiliating to write to someone publicly and say that I need money because I'm not well off. But if we have this anonymous system, and this could be something that's completely sihtkapital, okay, you're shaking your head, so no.
No. We've reviewed that, but it's very difficult to administer. So there are ways to do it. So
right. And so, but an anonymous application system and a confidentiality sort of a barrier so that word doesn't get out, because it can make a huge difference, especially in a young person's life. But again, we want to avoid that stigma around sort of asking for money, but establishing something. A lot of these things are very difficult asks, and it's a very sort of wide picture, a wide brush that I'm painting this all under. But I think we often get bogged down on very simple things. Someone can shoot a hole into our argument or our plan, our idea, and we sort of sit back and we go, well, we tried. But I think continually fighting problems with solutions and just, if a door is locked, you just try the other door. You just keep going. It's endless, but I think, we don't really have another choice. We just have to keep plugging away, finding solutions. And some of the simplest solutions are from the youth. Ignorance is bliss. And, you could be sort of thinking about these problems, and a child could just come up and just say, like, what about that? And we're all sort of in this groupthink mentality, and they could provide that solution. So the theme is just giving them that platform. Obviously, enablers would be the youth and everyone. We have to be this pro-youth oriented, youth-focused, basically united front. We have to continue to preach to them that you may think it's hard to get involved, but it's actually a lot easier than you think, and showing them how easy it is. Hurdles are obviously apathy. Children are bombarded these days with alternative programming that's non-Estonian, and we have to admit that some of it is better than ours, right? It's, we're not blessed with all these fancy summer camps with horses and whatever, but we have ways around that to position ourselves to offer something completely different for them and engage those children. And obviously in action right now, we're all postulating and talking, and the most difficult part is that action, that first step, and finding a way to create that first step in order to get the ball rolling. So The last thing that I would say is that this visioning session has been very, in my mind at least, very effective. I'm walking away with a lot more knowledge, and I'm sure you all are as well. But I think the next visioning session should also include some influencers much younger than myself, who are actually involved in Scouts still and Gaidid and other youth groups, be it Kasvatajad for Jõgeno and Seedaru, etc. I could go on, but having more youth influencers taking this all in and then proceeding to spread our good word. So that's all I have to say.